ENQUIRY Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @QuenReview, that is @ CUENDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@quenreview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUENDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from The National on Friday the 19th of January 2024. From the news section. COVID inquiry. Uncertain guidance caused Scotland care home deaths. This article is written by Lucy Jackson. Lives could have been saved in care homes in Scotland if it was not for the confusion caused by guidance issued in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, it has been claimed. The COVID inquiry has entered its third day in Edinburgh, where it is looking at how decisions were made during the pandemic by the Scottish Government. It is separate to the Scottish COVID inquiry. Speaking on Thursday, Dr. Donald McCaskill, Chief Executive of Scottish Care, said he had absolutely no doubt deaths could have been avoided if it had not been for confusion over whether residents should or should not have been referred to hospital if they had COVID-19. His statement came after Usman Tariq, counsel to the UK COVID inquiry, read aloud an email that Scottish Care received on March the 25th, 2020, from one of its members raising concerns about guidance issued to the sector, which seemed to suggest people in care homes who developed COVID-19 should not be referred to hospital. Tariq told the inquiry the member said that the suggestion appeared to conflict with the sector's aim of protecting the elderly and most vulnerable, and that he questioned whether there was a better way to deal with the unfolding situation other than keeping patients isolated. He said a statement provided to the inquiry by Scottish Care also made reference to what was presumed to be a blanket ban on referring people from care homes to hospital, and asked Dr. McCaskill how care home staff came to believe this was the meaning of the guidance issued on March the 13th, 2020. They arrived at that belief because it was their experience in numerous instances of attempting to gain access to a hospital, or indeed to a GP, to enable an admission to hospital, Dr. McCaskill told the inquiry. There was a presumption that if an individual contracted COVID in a care home, they should be supported and enabled in the care home and should not be transferred out of the care home. I'm not denying that for many individuals that was the right clinical decision to support an individual, often with palliation, to enable the end of their life in as a supportive and dignified manner as possible. But the presumption that that should be the result and the end decision and clinical assessment for all is simply wrong. At the same time, I was commenting publicly about the draft ethical framework, which was developed by the chief medical officers at the time, which had used age as a proxy for decision-making should we get to a situation where there were limits on resources available for clinical intervention. That existence of an age proxy, age discrimination, was evidenced, I believe, in the presumption that if somebody developed a condition such as dementia in a care home, they should not ordinarily be transferred to hospital. It wasn't just COVID that was preventing somebody being transferred, it was other conditions where ordinarily they might not be transferred because of the desire to make sure the NHS was as clear as possible. I have absolutely no doubt that individuals whose lives could have been saved were not saved because of the nature of that uncertainty caused by this guidance. That article was written by Lucy Jackson. This is from The National on Friday the 19th of January 2024, from the news section. M&S. MSP writes to Marks & Spencer over closure of Scottish store. This article is written by Xander Eliards. An NSP MSP has written to Marks & Spencer after the firm announced it would be closing a flagship Scottish store after 80 years. On Thursday, M&S said it would be closing the St Nicholas Street store in central Aberdeen off Union Street, which first opened in 1944. The firm said it would be expanding its outlets at Union Square near Aberdeen Station as part of a £15 million revamp. Kevin Stewart, the SNP MSP for Aberdeen Central, has written to the firm, raising concerns about jobs, what will happen to the vacated site, and offering to meet to discuss the path forward. The former Transport Minister wrote, "I understand that the new Union Square store will see Aberdeen become home to one of the leading stores in the M&S estate." Marks & Spencer has been at the heart of St Nicholas Square and Union Street for decades, and many in Aberdeen, including myself, are saddened to hear that your store there will be closing down. The news today will undoubtedly leave many of my constituents with concerns. I would be grateful if you could outline your plans for the staff who currently work in the St Nicholas store. Ideally, all staff who currently work at the St Nicholas store will transfer to the new store, but if that is not the case, I would implore you to ensure that any headcount reduction is carried out without compulsory redundancies. M&S previously told the Press and Journal that there will not be any permanent loss of jobs. Stewart's letter goes on, "I understand that Marks & Spencer is the owner of the St Nicholas site, and I would ask that you play a proactive role in the search for a new tenant for the St Nicholas site. It would be devastating to the area if this site was to lie vacant for any length of time. Could I ask you to outline your plans for the St Nicholas site? Although I have concerns for the staff and customers of the St Nicholas shop, I welcome the investment in the Union Square store and the vote of confidence in Aberdeen that this represents. I wish you every success with the new store and for Marks & Spencer to have as long a future at Union Square as it has a history at St Nicholas Square. I would welcome the opportunity to discuss with you the future of both the St Nicholas site and the Union Square store." Announcing the closure of the St Nicholas site on Thursday, Rachel Rankin, the North East Regional Manager for M&S, said that the firm was aiming to create a destination shopping experience. She said, "The scale of our investment is a vote of confidence in the future of retail in Aberdeen city centre. This will be a flagship store on the same scale as the city centre stores in Birmingham and Liverpool. Where we have already invested in new formats, our customers have responded to the destination shopping experience." That article was written by Xander Eliards. This is from The National on Friday the 19th of January 2024, from the news section. Scottish Government raises availability of food concerns over Brexit. This exclusive article is written by Hamish Morrison. Concerns have been raised by the Scottish Government about the availability of basic foodstuffs in Scotland due to inadequate information from Westminster on new Brexit trade measures, the National can reveal. In a letter to the UK Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, the Scottish Government said it had received no clear answers from Whitehall on the implementation of the new border target operating model. The scheme sets new rules for how imported goods arriving in Britain from abroad are processed, including new digital health certificates for the likes of live plant and animal products. It is due to come in this month, but Rural Affairs Secretary Mari Goujon said information on how it should be implemented at Scottish ports had not been forthcoming from the UK government, in a letter seen by the National. She wrote, "One of my chief concerns now is the continuing absence of any information about how the Windsor framework will be implemented in conjunction with the border targeting operating model. To be blunt, without significant information on how the determination of non-qualifying Northern Irish good status will be made, to whom communicated, how and within what deadlines, it is completely impossible to determine what, if any, facilities and services may be required at Scottish and other ports on the Irish Sea, including Cairn Ryan. You will comprehend that if we do not know whether 2 consignments, 2,000 consignments, or none are expected to be notified to relevant officials in Scotland, it is beyond practicality to develop an appropriate facility that is effective, efficient, and proportionate." She added, "These are basic components to any import control scheme, yet we find ourselves in the month that such controls are due to come into effect with no clear answers on any operational aspect. This is unacceptable given how controls have the potential to impact on Scotland's food resilience and security, on the availability and accessibility of basic foodstuffs, especially in rural and island areas, and crucially to the cost of food, harming people and businesses still further as we start a new year." Goujon said that while information on how the scheme would be administered was operational, it was solely within the gift of the UK government to provide it, adding, "It is equally impossible to understand which organisations and staff will be needed to resource any such checks, if such there will be." The UK government was approached for comment. This article was written by Hamish Morrison. This is from the National on Friday the 19th of January 2024, from the Culture section. TV adverts depict Scottish people using lazy stereotypes in adverts, study suggests. This article is written by Adam Robertson. Scottish people are depicted as working class and tight with money in TV advertisements, a new study has suggested, with ad executives admitting they are very lazy with portrayals of different people. The new research shows that advertising executives adopt stereotypical portrayals of Scots when using them to promote products. The study was commissioned by Channel 4 as part of its Mirror on the Industry project and questioned 100 advertising executives and 1,000 members of the public. Characters with Scottish accents are 3 times more likely to be working class in adverts than those with Southern English accents. Research also showed Scottish people are favoured in banking adverts because, as one executive said, they are thought to be really tight. One executive told researchers, "What we do is we borrow from lazy stereotypes. When you're writing an ad, for example, there's some lazy stereotyping around accents. Always put a Scottish voice on a bank ad because the stereotype says they're really tight. If you want somebody to be a little bit thick, West Country accents. If you want to signify dirty-handed working class, stick a Brummie in it." Another chief creative officer at a London advertising agency commented, "We are very, very lazy and we think that we're at the cutting edge of culture and that we inform it. We're not. We're at the back end of the pantomime horse. Advertising is really, really bad. We're our own echo chamber and that echo chamber is well-spoken, and for the well-spoken we read being intelligent." The report concluded that accent and manner of speech are often used as stereotypical signifiers of class in ads. This is a technique commonly acknowledged by media professionals, highlighting how the class issue we have in the ad industry is infiltrating our creatives and reinforcing negative biases, it said. Representation and portrayal of working-class people can be improved by increasing awareness of industry and personal biases, leveraging insight and thinking carefully about how language and how subjects in briefs are written and defined. Research manager at Channel 4, Samantha Cannon, said, "Working on this project has made us unpick some of the assumptions around social grade and class and question whether this is okay, and what impact does this have on the ads being produced and broadcast to the nation? We don't have all the answers, but we do want to raise some of the key issues surrounding the topic and provide some ideas to think differently about it when it comes to advertising." That article was written by Adam Robertson. This is from The National on Friday the 19th of January 2024, from the comments section. Weighing up SNP's odds of fighting another day. This article is written by Gordon McIntyre Kemp. I have been getting a fair few emails and calls from people asking me to explain the SNP's electoral strategy. I haven't discussed it with the party, so the following are my outsider observations. It seems to me that the SNP have clearly set out their stall at the next UK general election to try to be nice to Labour voters. They are betting on a trifecta of Labour voter-friendly policies to stop the Labour surge this side of the border: freezing council tax, raising tax on higher earners to pay for vital services, and prioritising an industrial strategy, as Labour doesn't have one, are all aimed at the Labour vote. But I don't think it will work. Offering to work productively with Labour and the get rid of the Tories message is about those Tory SNP marginals where Labour votes are wasted. However, getting rid of the Tories doesn't work in the SNP's favour in all of those Labour SNP marginals, and that is the key battleground. They have accepted the polling narrative that getting rid of the Tories is front and centre of people's minds, but in the context of a UK election, getting rid of the Tories means voting Labour. Tactical voting may allow the SNP to take a batch of the 7 current Conservative seats, but they could lose double that or more to Labour as things stand. The SNP decided not to make this general election a de facto referendum, where a majority of votes would lead to independence, as they feared that Labour's English surge would spill over the border, and the fact that this is a UK rather than a purely Scottish election would make a majority vote a bigger ask than at Holyrood in 2026, after they have laid the groundwork. There is also the issue that in a general election, 16 and 17-year-olds and EU citizens cannot vote, 1 or 2% difference. In addition, new UK general election voter registration rules, also known as vote rigging rules, will target poorer, independent-supporting communities, and the increased spending limits mean that the Tories can outspend everyone else in a general election. The negative factor that has sealed the SNP's cautious approach is that the police investigation into the party's CEO and former leader has not reached a conclusion. It would be a massive distraction if the next steps are revealed during a de facto independence campaign. So, the SNP are hoping to minimise the damage of Labour's resurgence. They want to take some Tory seats to compensate for expected losses to Labour and maintain an SNP majority. That way, they get the mandate to attempt to negotiate independence, and when that is refused, they have a mandate to fund the Constitutional Convention from Scottish Government funds. The Convention's job would be to lay the foundations for a de facto referendum approach to Holyrood 2026. There are problems with this approach. Firstly, being nice to Labour offers them an open goal in winning back their old Glasgow and Lanarkshire heartlands from the SNP. Think of the psychology of Labour voters who switched to the SNP and supported independence. Those voters have lost an independence referendum, not got the UK government they wanted since 2010, very probably lost an EU referendum, and now they have a chance to get a win and get rid of the Tories by voting the way they used to, and the SNP's message doesn't really contradict that. Also, a great deal more of the SNP vote is purely independence-related than the party like to admit. Despite the promise that independence will be on line 1, page 1, etc., the Indie part of the campaign seems lacklustre. If Indie supporters stay at home like they did in 2017, and the recent by-election, to send a signal that the SNP are not radical enough on independence, then it could be a very bad night for the party. There is still time for the SNP campaign to get more creative, to be more radical, and to more forcibly make the case that Labour will be no better for Scotland than the Tories. The big hope is that if a Labour victory in the rest of the UK is seen as a done deal, then Labour voters may not feel the need to turn out, as Starmer has zero charisma and no personal appeal in Scotland. The police investigation into the SNP's financial dealings hangs above the party like a sword of Damocles, but if the investigation is dropped without charges, that will create a stooshy, an SNP bounce, and free up their ability to fundraise. It's too early to predict results. We don't even know the polling date yet. A lot can happen between now and autumn, if that's when it happens. But right now, it looks more like 2017 than 2015. That article was written by Gordon McIntyre Kemp.
This is from The National on Monday, 22nd January 2024. From the News section. Garden shed blows onto railway near Scottish station. By Adam Robertson. Strong winds caused by Storm Isha led to a garden shed being blown onto the railway at a station in Glasgow. It comes as a yellow warning remains in place across Scotland as a result of the storm, with travel severely disrupted. In a post on Twitter X, Network Rail Scotland said, "We've just found what remains of a garden shed on the line at Belgrove Station in Glasgow. If you live next to a railway, please secure garden sheds, trampolines and patio furniture as best you can." More images posted by Network Rail showed the extent of debris which still needs clearing. Another post said, "This is Whitecraigs on ScotRail's Glasgow Central to Neilston route. A large tree has fallen onto the railway here, damaging the overhead wires. We are working to clear the debris and repair the damage as quickly as we can." The latest update from ScotRail, posted shortly after 6 a.m, said, "There are currently no ScotRail services running following Storm Isha. This is for safety reasons. We'll keep our app, website and journey check pages fully updated, so please check them regularly for updates." It added, "Network Rail Scotland will need to inspect all of the closed lines in daylight for any damage, flooding or debris on tracks following the storm." Other images showed the damage done in Shawlands in Glasgow, with one photo showing how a tree had smashed through a car window. We previously told how passengers were left shocked as strong winds blew a suitcase across the tarmac at Edinburgh Airport. A number of flights heading to and from Scotland were forced to divert as a result of the strong winds yesterday, while some were cancelled. Some schools remain closed, although the Met Office has said the storm is beginning to move away in its update this morning. That article was by Adam Robertson. This is from The National on Monday, 22nd January 2024. From the Politics section. WhatsApp. Carol Vorderman calls out misleading Nicola Sturgeon news stories. By Steph Brown. Carol Vorderman has called out misleading news reports about Nicola Sturgeon's pandemic WhatsApp messages. News outlets reported on Friday that the former First Minister deleted all her messages on the platform related to the coronavirus crisis, as the UK ENQUIRY heard she appeared to have retained no messages whatsoever. But Sturgeon issued a statement at the weekend, emphasising that she did not steer the pandemic response via informal messaging. She added that the inquiry does have messages between me and those I most regularly communicated with through informal means. Sturgeon said she's not a member of any WhatsApp groups. Ex-Countdown star Vorderman has since highlighted the popular politician's comments. Vorderman added that she had deleted a previous comment she made on a news story, stressing it had been misleading. She encouraged people to read Sturgeon's statement in response to the BBC and other reports. Sharing Sturgeon's statement, Vorderman posted on Twitter X, Nicola Sturgeon's response to the BBC and other reports yesterday saying she had deleted her WhatsApp. Please read. After highlighting a key part of the statement, which said Sturgeon was able to obtain copies of messages despite them not being retained on her own device, she added, she also said she will give her evidence when she's scheduled to soon. I'm glad and will delete reference to the original report now, as it seems it was misleading. Thank you for all your messages of support for her. She's very popular. Sturgeon said any handwritten notes made by her were passed to my private office to be dealt with and recorded as appropriate, stressing that at all times she acted in line with Scottish Government policy. I did not get every decision right, far from it, but I was motivated only and at all times by the determination to keep people as safe as possible, Sturgeon said. The inquiry also heard that former Deputy First Minister John Swinney and National Clinical Director Jason Leach also regularly deleted WhatsApp messages. Retired civil servant Ken Thompson, who was giving evidence at the inquiry, denied that this was done to try and defeat freedom of information requests. That article was by Steph Brown.
From The National, Monday the 22nd of January, from the comment section. Israel's destruction of Gaza isn't a war, it's genocide. A comment piece by Steph Payton. If war is hell, there is no war in Gaza for Israel. Not while IDF soldiers continue to have such a raucous good time in the ruins of Palestine. Even a just war, if such a thing exists, comes with a terrible, terrible cost to human life and the collective consciousness of soldiers and societies. War digs its scars deep, and they bleed still long after the declarations of mission accomplished. Our own supposedly glorious wars have inspired many warnings to the young and zealous in the form of poems and stories that unmask the real face of conflict, the one only revealed after their propaganda stops and enlistment offices are closed. It's the old lie, dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. It is sweet and befitting to die for one's country. I do not see the heaviness of war in the faces of occupying soldiers when they post online about the schools and universities they've reduced to rubble. I do not see it either in the faces of those leaders who revel in the total destruction of Gaza. I do not see a war, I see genocide. To describe Israel's brutal, indiscriminate onslaught as a war is to fundamentally misunderstand the nature of its interest in Gaza and the West Bank. This is not a conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. It is a conflict between Israel's desire to expand its borders by force and the Palestinians who live in their way. And Palestinians have found themselves vastly outgunned. What defence can Palestine truly make against one of the most militarised nations on the planet, with an imperialist West ready to arm and abet at every opportunity, unconditionally? Surely, Western leaders will wring their hands and tell Netanyahu how nice it would be if he and his murderous government could just maybe consider thinking about reining it back a little bit, if it was no trouble, if he wouldn't mind. Anyway, here's another $147.5 million worth of emergency arms sales. Don't drop it all in one place. There is a profound pain in seeing the videos coming out of Israel and the vast differences between them and what the Palestinian journalists and civilians are able to post between communication blackouts. There are videos of IDF soldiers in dinosaur costumes launching missiles from advanced military weaponry, of troops singing and praying down a microphone in a mosque in Jenin in the occupied West Bank, while 11 dead Palestinians lay nearby, of a British Israeli soldier picking through the underwear drawer of a Palestinian whose house he had invaded, before posting a poll on Instagram asking followers to rate them halal, haram, or kinky terrorism. Out with the battlefield, pro-Zionist social posts are a world away from the rubble. Glossy, confident celebrities tearfully declare themselves home in front of the camera. Yoga prayers for hostages by the water, surrounded by expensive yachts in a bustling city. And, of course, the now infamous videos of Israeli citizens dancing and joking that they have water while their neighbours do not. From Israel, too, there are videos of resistance to the actions of the government. From Gaza, I see only struggle and death. Dead children, dead men and women, dead journalists, some from bombs, some from what increasingly appear to be executions, and soon, many, many more from sickness and starvation. From the occupier, curated spaces and displays of cruel power. From the occupied, pictures of a society on the edge of collapse. This is not a war. Nobody who looks at the material circumstances of Israel and Palestine side by side could come to the conclusion that it was. The reticence from the British political elite to speak out against these atrocities is infuriating when there is such a clear injustice being perpetrated. We're watching the West make the same mistakes as they have in the past, from previous interventions in the Middle East back to the beginning of its own bloody imperialism. Never again means nothing at all if it does not extend beyond protecting the West's own interests and allies. How can it have forgotten the lessons of past conflicts so easily? We don't need to go all the way back to Wilfred Owen in 1920 to find a lesson in the nature of modern warfare and the West's role in global conflicts. When Owen wrote Dulce et Decorum Est, it was based on his direct experience of the First World War, trench warfare, mustard gas, no man's land. In contrast, Gregory Burke's Black Watch portrays the eponymous Scotch regiment in Iraq in 2004, where their armaments and equipment so totally eclipse the capabilities for their targets that it becomes a recurring theme of the play. In one scene, as the soldiers idly watch a 4-hour airstrike on fleeing Iraqis, one comments, "This isn't fucking fighting, it's just plain old-fashioned bullying like." "It's good to be the bully," replies another. And that was a comment piece by Steph Payton. From the National, Monday the 22nd of January, from the comment section, "The teams keeping us safe on Scotland's mountains deserve our thanks." Article by columnist Kirsty Strickland. "At the start of the year, I joined thousands of others across the country in committing to a no-spend January. It's a challenge designed to mitigate the many excesses and indulgences of the Christmas period. You're allowed to spend money on bills, food and essentials, but nothing else. I cancelled my Amazon Prime subscription to avoid temptation. I deleted all the apps that make it too easy to order a takeaway. And I'm eating my way through the long-forgotten contents of my cupboards. Tin peaches, anyone? My weekly food shop has been stripped of all the wee treats that make it fun. So no scented candles, no flowers, no books, and, of course, no booze either. It's been a learning curve, but 3 weeks in and I'm going strong. However, last week I decided to bend the rules a bit and donate a small amount of money to charity, which I'm pretty sure is an acceptable loophole. I felt compelled to dust off my bank card after reading a news story about a heroic mountain rescue that took place in the Cairngorms last weekend. Volunteers from the Cairngorm and Braemar mountain rescue teams found a walker after a gruelling 10-hour search. Police indicated the man's position in Ben McDowie by tracing his phone, but a rescue helicopter was unable to be scrambled to help due to foggy conditions. In a video posted on the Cairngorm Mountain Rescue Team's Twitter page, volunteers with head torches could be seen trekking through the heavy snow and high winds to reach the lost walker. The humble, matter-of-fact post on its page giving details of the incident did nothing to disguise the incredible selflessness and bravery of all those involved. It's no exaggeration to say that mountain rescue teams regularly put their own lives on the line to help others in need. The time they dedicate to volunteering isn't only limited to the many hours they spend on rescue call-outs. There's also the time spent on ongoing training and learning as they familiarise themselves with new equipment, new techniques and first aid skills. That this emergency service is staffed by volunteers across Scotland and, in large part, reliant on donations, only makes their heroism even more admirable. They understand more than most the danger posed by nature. They see firsthand what happens when things go wrong and how quickly that can develop. It is remarkable knowing what they know and having seen what they have seen, that, time and time again, they strap on their boots and venture out into danger when they are called upon to do so. Given that these brave men and women are putting themselves in danger, for free in their own time, it goes without saying that people who enjoy walking in the beautiful scenery Scotland has to offer should do everything they can to ensure they are never reliant on these volunteers' help. We know Scotland can experience 4 seasons in one day, but, in winter, up in the hills and mountains, conditions are only ever going to be quite dangerous, really dangerous or perilous. We've all read stories about walkers in inadequate clothing and footwear having to be rescued from a mountain in winter, totally unprepared for the terrain. There's no suggestion that's what happened in this case. Even the most responsible and well-prepared walker can't account for every eventuality. Sudden illness doesn't wait until you're in a more convenient location to access help. One small slap and a twisted ankle can mean you've run out of daylight hours before you're able to reach the bottom. The best laid plans can easily fall apart through no fault of the walker involved. And, thank God, rescue teams are willing and able to step in when that happens, but personal responsibility is still important. At any time, but, especially in the colder months, Scotland's mountains must be treated with a degree of reverence and caution. In 2022, there were 636 incidents in Scotland's mountains. Last December saw an increase compared to the same time the previous year. The severity of the call-outs is more acute in winter, as is the level of personal risk to the rescuers involved. Scotland is home to some of the most breathtaking scenery in the world. We are lucky to live in a country where a stunning walk up a beautiful hill or mountain is never far away. Our well-trodden mountains and hills are of huge benefit to those who enjoy them. That is only possible because of the army of heroes who dedicate their time and energy to helping those in need when a walk in nature takes a dangerous turn. And that was a comment piece by Kirsty Strickland.
The National, recorded on Tuesday, 22nd of January 2024. The Culture section. Burns Night. I tried Aldi's vegetarian haggis and loved it. By Andrew Smart, SEO journalist. Like most in Scotland, I've become all too familiar with the yearly ritual of tucking into a traditional plate of haggis, neeps and tatties, in honour of Scotland's national poet, Robbie Burns. However, as someone who lives in a largely vegetarian household, the dish always seemed to exclude those who chose not to eat meat. Comprising of sheep liver, heart and lung encased in the animal's stomach, haggis is perhaps the most meat-centric dish one can eat, and something even many ardent meat-eaters would turn their noses at. Luckily, Aldi and Macaulay's have released a vegetarian haggis that is now available in stores across Scotland. With Burns Night now only days away, and this month being Veganuary, I thought I'd give the haggis a try and see if it stands up to the real deal. Making Aldi's vegetarian haggis. I first began by preheating the oven at gas mark 5 before carefully reading the cooking instructions and removing the haggis from its plastic casing. There were 2 cooking options listed, with customers able to choose between the microwave and oven. I opted for the latter as this seemed like the most authentic out of the options available. I placed the haggis in an oven-proof dish and filled this to around halfway with boiling water from the kettle. I then put all of this in the oven's middle shelf and waited for around an hour and 15 minutes for the dish to cook. With all this done, I took the opportunity to pour myself a dram of iron brew. I avoided whisky as it was still afternoon and put my feet up. How did it taste? Once the haggis was ready, I began dishing it out and started my taste test. The first thing that stood out to me was how oaty the texture was compared to real haggis, with this initially taking away from the experience for me. However, these thoughts were quickly overtaken by a pleasant sense of surprise as the mix of black pepper, salt, chickpeas and ground pimentos came together to create an authentic taste that emulated that slight nip in real haggis. Despite containing no meat, it wouldn't be that easy to notice unless you were looking for it, as the texture of the minced ingredients was scarily close to the real deal. Final verdict. After trying the Aldi alternative, I can say with confidence that it's better than the original and something that I will be incorporating into my Burns Night traditions. Not only does it do a great job of emulating real haggis, but it stands up on its own as a fantastic wee meal on a cold winter's night. I'd give Aldi's vegetarian haggis a 4 out of 5 for its taste, but I still believe the meal and its texture could have benefited from fewer oats. By Andrew Smart, The National, recorded on Monday 22nd of January 2024. The Culture Section, Travel, In the Footsteps of William Wallace and Scott Hutchison in Selkirk, by Robin McElvey, travel writer. A brace of Seminole Scots have drawn me here to Selkirk in the Ettrick Valley. William Wallace and Scott Hutchison. I'm in search of the Kirk of the Forest, where Wallace is said to have been proclaimed the Guardian of Scotland in 1298. And this town, amid the bonny hills and the ancient Ettrick Forest, was where Hutchison, one of Scotland's greatest ever songwriters, was inspired to conjure up lyrics that also touch hearts, souls and minds. My quest starts well, being served a pint of local Tempest ale and superb Eyemouth landed haddock and chips in the historic Cross Keys Inn in the Ettrick Bridge, by the son of another Borders luminary, Rory Steele, whose dad David was the Scottish Parliament's first presiding officer, is a life-affirming joy. Rory grew up here and couldn't bear it when the inn closed, so he bought it last year. Cross Keys is an essential community hub. I had to save it. We've breathed new life in. We've now got darts nights, quiz nights, and offer older members of the community a place to come to eat a hot meal and keep warm. In this part of the world, community is clearly not just a buzzword. I find more passion after walking 3 miles downriver to Akewood Tower, www.akewoodtower.com. My first base. It's quite something staying in a 500-year-old Borders Tower house. Akewood Tower is not just a building, it's about pride, passion and love for this unique place. We're lucky to be able to share it in the Ettrick Valley with people from all over the world, explains owner Vicky Steele. Akewood is a delight. I play table tennis in the games room, cook up Borders lamb on the raga, and savour a dram by the huge roaring fireplace, then ease into my grounds for stargazing. The next day I push on into Selkirk itself. It may not be the first Borders town that trips off people's tongues. That's surprising given the aforementioned luminaries, but also Sir Walter Scott, who presided as Sheriff of Selkirkshire in the Grand Courtroom, that still soars above the main square. Scott's statue vaults skywards outside. The first Borders Abbey was founded in Selkirk too. Without it, there may have been no Kelso Abbey. Selkirk also hosts arguably the most spectacular common riding. I've touched on the renaissance of the Market Square in the National previously, and its traditional suitor. Selkirk was once renowned as the Suitors' Town, and I'm relieved to find Market Square is still in the up. Three Hills Coffee is roasting superb brews, and the general store, Remakery, is going great community guns. The guys behind the Selkirk Distillers have just opened Tibby's, a gin bar and eatery. I savour their gin infused with real Selkirk bannock, made at Cameron's a few doors away, and enjoy the warm community tales of Eva Primuska as she pours delicious gins. My accommodation and centre for my second night is the Grand Scottish Baronial 5 Turrets, www.5turrets.com, which is gloriously contemporary inside. It's one of the most spectacular self-catering abodes I've stayed at in the Borders, but its owner offers more. Gethin Chamberlain is an ex-foreign correspondent who, after a life on the road, zeroed in on Selkirk to start this business as well as Go Wild Scotland. Go Wild Scotland is a wildlife tourism project with a difference. I wanted to run a wildlife operation that offered people remarkable wildlife experiences, but also gave something back to the local community, smiles Gethin. He has a burning passion for the Selkirk area. It's like the Highlands here, just lower and easier to get to. Gethin's wildlife experience guides me deep into the local countryside, where we hunt for red squirrels and pine martens at his wee woodland hideout. In the Philiphaugh estate, we track the Ettrick water to the salmon ladder in the Philiphaugh Salmon Viewing Centre. I'm inspired too by the pioneering South of Scotland Golden Eagle project, before a superb lunch at the Waterwheel Cafe. It seems all of Selkirk is cheerily out for luncheon this crisp January afternoon. Some Scottish estates are resistant to community interaction. Not Philiphaugh. Gethin guides me to Mulshew Wood. The estate let us regenerate this woodland for the community with native species, he explains, and we've put in an accessible 1 kilometre long walking trail with bird viewing, smartphone info points and a pond, so everyone can enjoy it on multiple levels. The beaming families we pass are a testament to its life-affirming success, with plans for a forest education centre. I spend my last hour with my 2 inspirations. A walk among the gravestones of the Kirk of the Forest, where Wallace accepted the responsibility of freeing Scotland from English tyranny. This could be a massive tourist draw, but Selkirk is too modest for that. As the shadows lengthen, I follow the community-owned loch at the Haining to Scott Hutchison's namesake bench. Peering over the peaceful waters, I think of Selkirk's impressive community heart. I hope Hutchison would have approved of where Selkirk is heading. He wrote of making tiny changes to earth, and Selkirk is doing that by showing what communities can do with the same sort of passion that shone through his lyrics and that resounded through the spirit of Wallace. By Robin McKelvey.
From the National, Tuesday the 23rd of January. From the news section, 4-day working week pilot gets underway in Scotland. Article by Ross Hunter. A 4-day working week pilot for public sector workers in Scotland has got underway. Last year, First Minister Humza Yousaf included a pledge to trial a 4-day working week for some public sector workers in his first programme for government. Now, the Scottish Government has confirmed that 140 staff at the South of Scotland enterprise are now working a 32-hour week with no loss of pay. Wellbeing Economy Secretary Neil Gray said, "Work has commenced on the 4-day working week public sector pilot to assess the wellbeing, environmental and productivity benefits a 4-day working week could bring. We have appointed think tank Autonomy as our expert partner to support the pilot. The team involved in this project have previous 4-day working week pilot experience, including from the Valencian government pilot and the Icelandic public sector pilot. The South of Scotland's enterprise 4-day working week Pathfinder work has been folded into Autonomy's methodology, and engagement will continue with other public bodies interested in participating in a 32-hour working week pilot. Autonomy will also provide support and evaluate organisations moving to a contractual 35-hour working week. This will capture valuable insights from a wider range of public bodies on different shorter working week models and be included in the 4-day working week evaluation report. The think tank Autonomy are known for their work conducting the largest 4-day working week trial to date, which saw 61 companies in the UK take part in a 6-month trial in 2022. Following the conclusion of the trial, 92% of the companies decided to continue with the 4-day week, with 18 companies confirming that the change was permanent. Scottish Scream's MSP Ross Greer said his party has already embraced a 4-day week for their staff. The 4-day working week has a transformative impact on work-life balance, health and happiness. It means people can spend more time with their families, friends and loved ones, and it helps employers retain staff and boost productivity. We introduced a 4-day work for Scottish Green staff in 2022 and have seen the benefits for ourselves, including better job satisfaction and a reduction in stress. Our staff wouldn't go back, so I'm delighted that through our ruling government we are giving other workers this opportunity. The Scottish Government is rightly leading by example with these pilots. They will provide a lot of useful evidence and lessons which will in turn help other sectors and businesses to make the shift. Scottish Greens want a society where people are working to live rather than living to work. That means building an economy based on fair work, good wages and positive terms and conditions. The normalisation of a 4-day working week will be a key part of that change. Will Strong, Director of Research at Autonomy, added, "We're very pleased to be working with the Scottish Government on this historic trial. Alongside those who are already underway and the pilot and others who have already expressed interest, we will be looking to sign up a number of public sector organisations as the year progresses. A 4-day week with no loss of pay has been trialled extensively across the private sector and parts of the public sector to great success. It's important that we find out if it can also work in public sector organisations in Scotland." The National previously told of how one brewing business in Edinburgh embraced a 4-day week while continuing to grow. And that article was written by Ross Hunter. From the National, Tuesday the 23rd of January. From the news section, Scottish Council accused of holding funds after leisure centres saved. Article by Donald Turville, local democracy reporter. Edinburgh Council's finance chiefs have identified an additional £3.2 million for the city's cash-strapped leisure centres, averting a worst-case scenario which could have seen venues earmarked for closure. The cash injection for Edinburgh Leisure will include £800,000 to enable the organisation to return to paying all staff the real living wage, £12 an hour, after it opted out of the voluntary scheme last year to save money. Financial pressures have intensified for the publicly owned arms-length company due to increased energy bills and inflation in recent years, culminating in a forecasted £3.6 million deficit for the year ahead. Internal documents shared with Local Democracy Reporting Service this month showed the potential closure of 8 pools, gyms and sports facilities to save just under £2 million was presented to Edinburgh Leisure's board as part of a worst-case scenario financial planning for 2024-25. SNP councillor Kate Campbell said funding needed had been available all along and accused the Labour administration of choosing to hold off, allowing staff to be paid poverty wages and putting our leisure centres at risk. She added, "I'm glad Labour have finally caved in and all staff at Edinburgh Leisure will get the real living wage as a minimum, and our local sports facilities are no longer at risk. It's just a shame that, for around 300 workers, it's taken months of pressure from the SNP and trade unions to get here." Other measures to balance the books under consideration include reducing centres' opening hours, raising charges and reviewing employees' pension contributions. The shortfall has since been reduced to £3.2 million, which will be met by the Council if approved when the budget is set next month, a report to this week's Finance Committee confirmed. Council leader Cammy Day said he was committed to providing quality sport and leisure facilities for our residents. He added, "The Labour-led administration have been working alongside senior council colleagues to ensure we safeguard these facilities, and I am proud to say that we're finding the funds in our council budget, set later next month, to do so." SNP councillors welcomed the move, but accused the administration of choosing to hold off, funding and allowing staff to be paid poverty wages and putting our leisure centres at risk. Lib Dem group leader Kevin Lang said it was a huge relief that the money had been found to keep Edinburgh Leisure venues open, adding, "It was frightening to hear that some leisure centres and swimming pools were at risk." The additional monies will be made up of £1 million COVID support funding due to be allocated to Edinburgh Leisure over the next 3 years, but now being accelerated in 2024-25, with the rest directed from other sums previously set aside for continuing COVID impacts, the report said. It added, "The precise profile of this funding will be a subject to further discussion between the Council and Edinburgh Leisure as this revised model develops the final deficit figure as agreed." Day said, "Physical activity is vital for the physical and mental health of our city and is a key priority. The Labour-led administration have been working alongside senior council colleagues to ensure we safeguard these facilities, and I am proud to say we're finding the funds in our council budget to do so. I'm incredibly grateful to Finance and Resources Convener Councillor Mandy Watt, senior council colleagues, and Edinburgh Leisure for their huge efforts on this. We're also working to find a resolution on paying the real living wage to Edinburgh Leisure's employees. However, we also need to face up to the stark financial situation that we find ourselves in. Local authorities have suffered a decade of continuous real-term income cuts from central government, and Edinburgh is no exception. In fact, Edinburgh remains the lowest funded council per head in Scotland, Despite the unique pressures which come along with being Scotland's capital city, such as our projected population growth, the climate crisis, and our well-documented housing emergency. High energy bills, combined with inflation, have also brought significant pressure on both Edinburgh Leisure and the Council's wider estate. These factors are putting us under unprecedented pressure and are completely unsustainable. I'd call on all representatives in our city to demand that the government properly fund Edinburgh so we can continue delivering the services our residents deserve. Councillor Lang said, "It's a huge relief that the money has been found to keep Edinburgh Leisure's venues open. With a growing crisis in terms of the organisation's finances, it was frightening to hear that some leisure centres and swimming pools were at risk. It's now important to get Edinburgh Leisure onto solid financial footing for the long term. As part of that, I hope SNP councillors will never again threaten to withdraw all the organisation's funding. In my 7 years as a councillor, this is one of the most irresponsible and dangerous moves I've seen from a political group. I sincerely hope it's never repeated." And that article was by Donald Turville.
The National News on Wednesday, the 24th of January. Post Office team wasn't qualified in Scots law. An article written by Adam Robertson. The Post Office's legal team passed sub-postmaster cases on to prosecutors in Scotland without being qualified in Scots law, the Horizon IT inquiry heard yesterday. Robert Daly told the inquiry he and other Post Office investigators were not adequately supported before a solicitor firm was brought in to advise in 2013. Mr. Daly also said Horizon data alone was not sufficient to proceed with a prosecution of a sub-postmaster in Scotland, but it was sufficient in England and Wales. The former Post Office investigator was involved in the criminal investigation of 2 wrongly convicted sub-postmasters who died before their convictions were overturned. Newcastle sub-postmaster Peter Holmes was handed a community order and a curfew, and William Quorm, who had a branch in North Uist, was sentenced to 150 hours of unpaid work following their convictions. Giving evidence at the inquiry yesterday, Mr. Daly said the prosecution of sub-postmasters in Scotland required 2 corroborating pieces of evidence. He said, if you could only draw evidence from, for instance, Horizon data, and there was no supporting evidence, then you couldn't proceed with the case. Counsel to the inquiry, Emma Price, then asked, whereas in England and Wales, Horizon data alone would be sufficient, would it? Mr. Daly replied, I believe so. In his witness statement, Mr. Daly said he asked for support from Scottish solicitors after becoming concerned that he was not receiving the same support north of the border that he was in England. The statement read, it was recognised within the Post Office legal services and the security team that they weren't knowledgeable about Scots law. I was concerned that I wasn't receiving the same legal support, and I recall that I asked if Scottish solicitors could be sought to assist and advise on whether there was sufficient evidence to submit a file to the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. Miss Price asked, do you mean that there were no Scottish qualified lawyers within the criminal team? Mr. Daly replied, correct. Miss Price continued, is it right, therefore, that prior to managing to gain approval for BTO solicitors to advise on Scottish cases in 2013, the criminal law team was providing a decision on whether a case should be passed to the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service without being qualified in Scottish law? Mr. Daly said, I believe so, yes. The counsel to the inquiry then asked, did that concern you at the time? Mr. Daly responded, it did concern me more when I was on my own in Scotland from about 2000 until 2008, or 2009 possibly. I was the only investigator, and I just felt as if, at times, I would pass a case down to the criminal law team and there wasn't a full understanding of Scots law. I did approach the subject prior to 2013 to question if we could get anyone, but that just wasn't forthcoming at that time. I can't recall the dates when I did that. Miss Price went on, can you recall how long before 2013 you raised that? The Post Office witness said, possibly a couple of years, I just can't be certain. Miss Price also asked, Do you consider that Post Office investigators in Scotland were not adequately supported prior to the appointment of BTO solicitors to advise in 2013? Mr. Daly replied, yes. More than 700 Post Office branch managers were convicted after Fujitsu's faulty accounting software Horizon made it look like money was missing from their outlets. An ITV drama telling the story of the Post Office scandal aired earlier this month. The saga prompted an outcry from across the country after it was dramatised in Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. Hundreds of sub-postmasters are awaiting compensation, despite the government announcing that those who have had convictions quashed are eligible for £600,000 compensation. An article written by Adam Robertson. The National Politics on Wednesday, the 24th of January. Reaction as Scotland to Europe ferry plans are scrapped. An exclusive article written by James Walker. An SNP MP has said he is disappointed in both the UK and Scottish governments after plans for a new Scotland to Europe ferry were ditched due to a lack of financial backing. The route, 3 return sailings per week from Rosyth to the French port of Dunkirk, was earmarked for a May 2024 start date, but ferry operator DFDS pulled the plans on Tuesday, telling stakeholders in an email seen by the National that it was no longer feasible due to a lack of commitment from the Scottish and the UK government to help with start-up funding. Douglas Chapman, SNP MP for Dunfermline and West Fife, has been the lead campaigner for the issue for years. He told the National that despite our best efforts, it looked as though the service is locked in port indefinitely. He thanked shipping expert Derek Sloan, as well as Fife Council and staff at both ports and DFDS, for the time and energy that they put into the project. Mr. Chapman added that he was clearly disappointed in both the UK and Scottish governments, especially given the decision not to back the project was in the face of worsening export figures and the disastrous consequences of Brexit on the Scottish economy. In a final plea, he went on, "Now we are beyond the 11th hour. I would hope that the Scottish Government will convene a meeting to get everyone around the table to discuss a suitable package of support, given the extreme urgency involved." Neil Hanvey, Alba's Westminster leader, reissued his call for Transport Minister Fiona Hislop to convene a summit with all stakeholders to kick-start the process. The Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath MP said that time is running out to make this a reality and it is now vital that the Transport Minister intervenes. He added, "There is overwhelming public support and a strong business case. All that is lacking is the political will and some pump prime funding from the Scottish and UK governments to get it up and running. Any such funding would be readily recouped many times over by the gross value added generated in economic activity. The Scottish Government subsidises every other form of public transport, including ferries for our island communities, as well as trains, buses and air travel. It's high time the Scottish Government showed some leadership in this regard and convened a summit of all the interested parties so that progress can finally be made." Responding to the news that the ferry plans are being scrapped, a Transport Scotland spokesperson said, "We've always made clear our support for the development of Scotland's ports and the potential for new direct freight and passenger ferry services linking Scotland to Europe. We will continue to engage with port operators and others to explore how that might be delivered so that Scottish exporters have more direct routes to market. The Scottish Government cannot subsidise routes in ways which would be anti-competitive, beyond considering the availability of limited grant funding opportunities for freight initiatives. We've been clear throughout our discussions that any new service will be required to be delivered on a commercial basis." An exclusive article written by James Walker. The National News on Wednesday, the 24th of January. Trains suspended and thousands without power in Scotland after Storm Jocelyn. An article written by Laura Pollock. Storm Jocelyn has brought fresh travel disruption to much of the UK less than 2 days after Storm Isha left 2 people dead and thousands without power. The 10th named storm of the season brought an amber warning for wind to parts of Scotland on Wednesday morning, with much of the UK covered by a yellow alert into Wednesday afternoon. Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks said that the north of Scotland endured several hours of gale-force winds with a gust of 74 miles an hour recorded in South Uist at around 10 o'clock on Tuesday night. Further transport disruption is expected, with rail services to and from Scotland suspended until at least noon on Wednesday. Martin Thompson, National Operations Manager for Resilience at Transport Scotland, said, "Across the wider network, we can expect to see more delays and cancellations, with ferries, flights and rail into Wednesday morning." Network Rail Scotland said it had dealt with incidents including flooding, fallen trees and a shed roof blowing onto a high wall above a track on Tuesday evening, and would be inspecting routes for damage from first light. A statement said, "It'll be done in many ways: teams on foot, in-road rail vehicles, freight locos and empty passenger trains. Our helicopter will be out too as soon as winds ease." ScotRail said all lines will be checked before services restart, saying it will be later on in the day before any trains can run. Avanti West Coast told passengers not to attempt to travel north of Preston until at least noon on Wednesday, and warned journeys in northwest England may take longer due to speed restrictions. Ferry services were also disrupted, with some CalMac services cancelled due to the weather conditions. Finlay McRae, head of operations at CalMac, said, "It's a challenging and difficult time for communities, with travel and supply chains interrupted throughout prolonged periods of adverse weather. While disruption is unavoidable, we're continually looking at service resumption options when there's a weather window and it is safe to do so. The safety of our crews, port staff and the customers we serve is our priority. We are always grateful to the communities who use the network for their patience and understanding during storms." Northlink Ferries said that morning sailings between Stromness on Orkney and Scrabster on the mainland and from Scrabster to Stromness were cancelled due to the adverse weather forecast. The 4:40 p.m. sailing from Stromness to Scrabster and the 7 p.m. sailing from Scrabster to Stromness remain under review. The A76 was closed in both directions between Skelmorley and Largs in western Scotland due to water breaking over the sea wall. The fourth bridge was open to cars and single-decker buses, with restrictions on high-sided vehicles on several bridges. 8 flights were cancelled at Dublin Airport and 4 at Glasgow Airport on Tuesday evening. An amber warning for wind issued by the Met Office is in place across the north and west of Scotland until 8 a.m. on Wednesday, with a yellow warning in place until 1 p.m. across Scotland, Northern Ireland, North Wales and North West England. A further yellow warning runs from 3 p.m. across North East England, the Midlands and South Wales. The number of flood warnings, meaning flooding was expected, had reached 37 in Scotland. Forecasters expect winds to gradually ease from the south as Storm Jocelyn moves away from the UK on Wednesday, which will be a day of sunny spells and blustery showers, although mainly dry in the south. Cloud and outbreaks of rain will move northeast on Thursday, with brighter conditions on Friday and Saturday and frequent showers in the north. Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks Distribution said its teams are working hard to restore power to customers in the north of Scotland whose supply has been affected. As of 8 a.m. on Wednesday, supplies have been successfully restored to 2,200 customers, with just under 2,400 properties currently off supply. Andy Smith, Operations Director at SSEN Distribution, said, "Jocelyn is the second severe storm the north of Scotland has faced in 3 days, and I'd like to thank our customers for their patience while we respond to it. Our network has held up well overnight, given the strength of winds we have seen across western and northern Scotland, but our teams still face another day of challenging conditions as we work hard to reconnect all of our customers." The family of a man who died after the car he was travelling in hit a fallen tree during Storm Isha have said their hearts are broken as they pay tribute to the much-loved 84-year-old. James Jimmy Johnston from Grangemouth was the front seat passenger in the car which struck a tree on the A905 Bean Cross Road in Grangemouth at around 11:45 on Sunday. Police said he was pronounced dead at the scene, while the other occupants of the vehicle were not injured. In a statement released through Police Scotland, Mr Johnston's family said, "A much-loved and well-respected family man who left a lasting impression on all who had the privilege to have met him. Our hearts are broken as a family, however we take great comfort in knowing that he has been reunited with his beloved wife Anne." Police appealed for information about the incident. Road Policing Inspector Andrew Thompson said, "Our thoughts are with the family and friends of Mr Johnston and all those involved in the collision. We continue to offer them support as our inquiries progress. I'd be keen to speak to anyone who saw what happened or who was on the A905 around 11:45 p.m. on Sunday. I'd also request anyone with dashcam footage of Bean Cross Road around that time to please review your footage and bring anything of significance to our attention." An article written by Laura Pollock. The National News on Wednesday the 24th of January. University setting its sights on the stars. An article written by Gregor Young. Heriot-Watt University has taken its first major step towards creating a space cluster after Edinburgh City Council approved plans for a £2.5 million state-of-the-art telescope station at the university's research park on the west of the capital. The planned Hub Optical Ground Station aims to demonstrate and test satellite quantum secure communications to counter cyber attacks. It's part of a collaboration also involving the universities of Strathclyde, Bristol and York, with space engineering expertise from the UK Government Science and Technology Facilities Council's RAL Space Facility. The optical ground station will further support research across a broad range of areas, including astronomy, astrophotonics and optical communications. Groundwork on the project, part of a major investment into a quantum satellite mission funded by the National Quantum Technologies Programme through the Quantum Communications Hub, is expected to begin this year. The project marks a strategic shift for the university as it looks to establish itself as a base for cosmic research and innovation. Professor Jill Murray, Deputy Principal of Business and Enterprise at Heriot-Watt, is now calling on more firms from across the space technology sector to consider a presence within the research park, which is the largest of its kind in Scotland, with around 1,000 staff across 28 organisations. Ms Murray said, "The burgeoning space industry in Scotland represents the latest frontier for which we are actively seeking to cultivate a pool of highly skilled graduates to propel innovation and research. The goal is to transcend traditional learning spaces and laboratories, fostering an environment conducive to groundbreaking collaborations. Any company that works in the space sector and who chooses to set up here will not only have ease of access to Scotland's capital and the Central Belt, but to our raft of talented students keen to gain industry experience and employment." An article written by Gregor Young.
The National, Thursday the 27th of January, from the sports section. Crosby wants Scotland to end era of mediocrity with Six Nations title, by Duncan Beck. Luke Crosby insists Scotland are determined to prove they are genuine Guinness Six Nations title contenders, as they aim to make up for a disappointing World Cup. Gregor Townsend's men exited France 2023 at the group stage, after losing to South Africa and Ireland, and, although competing in one of the tournament's toughest ever pools, they feel that as world-class side, they have more to offer. The theme of underachievement extends into the Six Nations, with third place in 2023 their best performance since finishing in the same position 5 years earlier. It is an unsatisfying return for a group of players considered among the best ever produced by Scotland, and Crosby insists there is a desire to end an era of mediocrity. As a group, we know we're a world-class team, but we need to put those results on the board in the Six Nations, the Edinburgh flanker said. We've taken our learnings from the World Cup. We've processed that individually and collectively. Now it's time to prove to the nation what we know ourselves, that we're a world-class team. It's about getting the results. It's as simple as that. We know the talent we have in our group individually. We know that on our day we're one of the best in the world. Now it's about putting that into practice. We look at the quality of our camp already. Everyone has shown an appetite to show what they can do as an individual and as a collective. We fell a bit short at the World Cup, so as a collective we want to get better. It's business time for us. If Scotland are to mount a meaningful challenge for the title, they must end their long wait for victory in Cardiff, which now stands at 22 years, when they face Wales on the opening weekend. They have flattered to deceive in the past, toppling England at Twickenham for the first time in 38 years in 2021, only to then falter by losing to Wales and Ireland. It is this inconsistency that has proved so costly, and for Crosby, the key is to ensure they adopt the right attitude in every one of the 5 matches that will define their post-World Cup outlook. If you turn up to a game at international level thinking you might lose, you've lost already. So, when you turn up, you have to know that you're better than your opposite man, he said. We have to walk into every game thinking we're going to win, because if you don't think that, you're going to lose and there's no point turning up. That's the mentality we've got. We need to start strong and get the result in every single game. Once Wales have been negotiated, France and England visit Murrayfield in matches that will dictate whether a first Six Nations title remains a credible option. That was an article by Duncan Beth. The National, Thursday the 25th of January, from the news section. Stephen Flynn. No SNP MPs will enter the House of Lords under my watch, by Ross Hunter. Stephen Flynn has said that no SNP MPs will be entering the House of Lords during his tenure as leader of the party at Westminster. Speaking to ITV programme representing Border, Flynn was asked whether he believed the SNP should begin taking up seats in the House of Lords. It comes after an article in the Times reported that former SNP Westminster leader Ian Blackford suggested the party should drop its opposition to membership of the House of Lords to increase nationalist influence in London during a meeting with student journalists. Following the story, an SNP spokesperson said Blackford would never take a seat in the unelected chamber and that the House of Lords should be abolished. Journalist Peter McMahon asked Flynn if he agreed with Blackford's comments. Ian Blackford also said that he thinks your party should take seats in the House of Lords. He's your predecessor. He led the group here. His argument is it's a revising chamber. You should be in there to help revise policies. A current example would be Rwanda, for example. Do you agree? Flynn replied, no. Pressed to expand upon his answer, he continued, the House of Lords is a corrupt institution, one which is anarchic, one which rewards people based upon, in some instances, simply who they were born to. There will be no SNP MPs entering the House of Lords, or indeed any SNP members entering the House of Lords on my watch. On Tuesday evening, SNP MP Joanna Cherry criticised Blackford's comment and suggested he was gunning for a peerage. She said in a post on X or Twitter, let me guess. Could it be because you want a peerage? Responding to Flynn's comment, she said, "Thank you, Stephen. While there are respectable arguments to be made for accountable second houses or revising chambers, this share of SNP peerages in the House of Lords need knocking on the head, as it is categorically not SNP policy." That was an article by Ross Hunter. The National, Thursday the 26th of January, from the news section. UK government unlikely to scrap biofuel cap to save Grangemouth, by Ross Hunter. Grangemouth is being held back from transitioning into a producer of a sustainable aviation fuel due to regulatory barriers imposed by UK government, according to a minister. During a meeting of the Grangemouth Future Industry Board on January the 18th, the head of legal affairs at Petronas Scotland, Ian Hardy, noted the barriers that existed to Grangemouth developing into a producer of biofuel and sustainable aviation fuel. Scottish Government Energy Minister Gillian Martin had asked what would be required to turn Grangemouth into a biorefinery and turn the transition to our advantage. However, Hardy said that the UK government's cap on hydro-treated esters and fatty acids, HEFA, a renewable diesel fuel produced from vegetable oils and fats, would need to be addressed to make this possible. Currently, he said, the cap put British companies at a disadvantage compared to their European neighbours. While the European Commission placed no limit on the amount of so-called green jet fuel that can be produced for the purpose of sustainable aviation, the UK imposed a cap due to concerns that aviation would monopolise the market for waste biofuels and result in more fossil fuels being produced by road and maritime sectors. Hardy said that transitioning Grangemouth to a biorefinery was commercially suboptimal while the cap remained in place. But UK Minister for Energy Security, Graham Stewart, said it was unlikely that national policy would be reshaped unless it is applied to all areas of the UK. The Scottish Government's Wellbeing Economy, Fair Work and Energy Minister, Neil Gray, said the UK Government refusing to change its policy on HEFA unless it applied to areas outside of Scotland was simply not good enough. He said, "It is very welcome that the UK Government committed to considering any proposals that support the long-term sustainable future of Grangemouth, and I have written to the Minister of State for Energy, Security and Net Zero to follow up on this." However, it is clear that there are serious regulatory barriers to the owners developing some of its most viable, new, more sustainable economic opportunities, such as sustainable aviation fuel. We heard that the major barrier is immediate investment in a biorefinery is UK regulation on the feedstock. If the message from the UK government is that it is not going to make changes unless it suits the rest of the UK, then this is simply not good enough. Grangemouth's hard workers and the wider community deserve better, and our future as a net zero country depends on them stepping up. All of us want to see the best possible future for Grangemouth, but the key powers in this area lie at Westminster, and we will continue to push them to make the necessary changes to ensure that it plays a key role in powering Scotland's drive to net zero. On the refinery and on other future opportunities for the Grangemouth site, the Scottish Government stands ready to work with UK ministers to see a sustainable future for the site. It comes after the fate of Grangemouth appeared to be sealed as ministers agreed to support its transition. Last year, bosses announced that the refinery could be closed as soon as 2025. That was an article by Ross Hunter.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Review. Tell your friends about our service.